Former Vice President Mike Pence is with us now. The book is So Help Me God. Congratulations. Welcome to Chicago. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Leland.
Why is the Biden administration ignoring pro-democracy protesters in our biggest geopolitical enemy's own hometown?
It's extraordinary. First and foremost, you have to understand that the Chinese Communist Party runs the largest police state in the world. Their surveillance capacities are the stuff of Big Brother, Leland, and so to see that many people taking to the streets is a real statement of political courage on their part. They're taking great risks for themselves or their families. And while it's being precipitated by the zero COVID policies 3 years into the pandemic, still being pressed down on the people, I believe it's also ultimately by the hunger for freedom that goes all the way back to the Tiananmen Square. It adheres to the human spirit. And I welcome it and admire the people taken to the streets in China.
You've gone just much farther in that statement than the president has, the current president, or than his spokespeople will. Interestingly enough, Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, I know you know very well, said this about President Trump and TikTok. He said that Trump was right about the dangers of TikToks, saying the U.S. government should do something about it. That's a Democratic senator. And yet the Biden administration, again, gives the Chinese a pass. Why?
Well, and it wasn't just TikTok, but it was Huawei. Remember, our administration took a strong stand against Huawei when many European countries, some of our biggest allies, were stepping up, ready to embrace that Chinese technology. We said, look, it's a security risk in the information technology age. And in a very real sense, we changed national opinion on China in this country. It's now broad and bipartisan, the recognition that China represents the greatest threat to our country in the long term, economically and strategically. But we also changed much of the view of the West about China and about the constant move toward using information technology to penetrate free societies.
So you all made this calculus. The American people bought into it. Much of Congress has bought into it. This administration takes clearly a different view of the threat of China and how to stand up to them. How do you explain that?
Well,
they don't get it?
I can't say as
want something else from the Chinese?
Leland, I can't say for sure, but I remember early in his campaign for president, Joe Biden was at a forum in which he talked about, he said, China as a competitor. He did one of his, come on, man. I mean, they didn't get it. They didn't understand it during the Obama-Biden administration. And while I'm pleased that they haven't undone the tariffs that we placed on China, I must tell you that the reticence of the administration as these protests unfurl reminds me of back in the day of 2009, when in the Obama-Biden administration, people took to the streets in Iran. Remember the Green Revolution? And frankly, it took Joe Lieberman, John McCain, me, and Howard Berman in the Congress to author a resolution because President Obama refused to speak in favor of people clamoring for democracy in Iran. So I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed to see the administration taking the stand that they're taking. Now more than ever, we ought to be speaking out for freedom, loving people around the world. We ought to be championing those that are championing their freedom, including in the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, well, and your administration did it with the Iranian Revolution, or Iranian protests, I should say, didn't become a revolution during your time. A lot of that in the book.
There is.
There is some light Thanksgiving weekend reading for me. You were undoubtedly the most loyal member of the Trump administration for 4 years. And no matter what interview you were in, what soundbite you were giving, whatever press conference or speech, you were 100% on message. President Trump betrayed you on January 6th, put your family's life in jeopardy, as you write in the book. Do you regret that loyalty, and is the lesson that Trump loyalty only works one way?
Well, let me say, I was always loyal to President Donald Trump.
For sure.
He was my president. He was my friend. And I don't regret what we did during the Trump-Pence administration. The president and I forged a team, not just the two of us, but the team that he assembled throughout our cabinet, that rebuilt our military, secured our border, revived our economy, saw 3 Supreme Court justices appointed, 300 federal judges, achieved American energy independence, and left America more prosperous and stronger than ever before, Leland. And I'm incredibly proud of that. Obviously, it didn't end well. And January 6th was a tragic day. But as I write in So Help Me God, it's been described as maybe the most fulsome defense of the Trump-Pence record that's been written. And I believe that it is, because I do believe we demonstrated when you put conservative principles into practice, America is more prosperous, we're more secure. And I hope people reading it who there may be greater interest in those final chapters, and I understand that. But I hope people will look at it and see the totality of our record and be as proud as I am. You
think the focus on January 6th and the focus over the past couple of weeks on your role and what you had to say about it is fair?
Well, look, I'm someone that believes in the First Amendment, including the freedom of the press. But I understand the public interest in what took place in and around January 6th. It was a tragic day, Leland. It was. But I'll always believe that we did our duty that day under the Constitution and the laws of this country. And because of the courage of law enforcement, both Capitol and federal law enforcement, the violence was quelled, we secured the Capitol, and we were able to complete our work under the Constitution the very same day. I think what began as a day of tragedy ended as a triumph of freedom. And I hope people see that in no other way, but that in reading So Help Me God, that they understand not only what we did, but why we did it, my dedication to the oath that I had taken that ended with a prayer, So Help Me God, and that ultimately they understand that it was my faith, my family, my background, my upbringing in the state of Indiana that led us to that moment.
You said faith, which obviously has informed a huge part of your life. It's the title of the book. The press clearly hates President Trump because he ridicules the norms that they really believe in and hold dear. Does the Washington press hold you, maybe not into ridicule, but a little bit of contempt because of your faith?
Well, there's an entire chapter in So Help Me God entitled Blessed, because there's a Bible verse that says that when you're criticized for your faith, you're blessed. And you're talking to somebody. I never thought that I would actually be criticized for being a Bible-believing Christian. I never thought my wife would be criticized when, as Second Lady of the United States, she was teaching art at a Christian school 2 days a week, Leland. But we really live in an environment where many in the national press, not all, but many are very foreign to the traditions of faith that really animate the lives of tens of millions of Americans, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Muslim. Faith is so important to people across this country. But in our experience in the White House, it from time to time became a subject of fascination by a press that didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, maybe also look down on it just a little bit.
Well,
I'll add that. You don't have to respond. This speaks to a politician, though, of another era, which is sort of your mold, right? The George H.W. Bush mold of public service. Your son went through Marine Officer Candidate School. People didn't know who he was. That was important to you. It was important to him. Can a politician without a celebrity personality and a celebrity need be successful in the celebrity culture we live in?
Well, I think that's a decision for the American people. I really think when you look at the long sweep of American history that we've had presidents that were larger than life characters. We've had other presidents that were defined in other ways, in quieter and in many respects more substantive ways. But I have great confidence in the days ahead that the American people are going to sort that out. I think no one could have defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 other than Donald Trump. I learned that as I write in So Help Me God. I actually endorsed another candidate in the Indiana primary in 2016, and in all fairness, Ted Cruz won all 3 counties I campaigned with him in. Donald Trump won the other 89. He was the right man at the right time to take on that Clinton machine. I'm confident Republican primary voters will have better choices for 2024, and I believe that they'll find the right man or woman fitted to these times.
Would you ever accept a VP nomination again?
I think running for vice president of the United States twice is enough for any American.
Okay. Slightly more Sherman-esque than the other question about who you'd ask to be your VP. It brings us to an interesting point, because you've also refused to really criticize President Trump throughout this in terms of personally going after him. And you've said that it's up to the American people if Trump is disqualified from being president again. Over the holiday weekend, had dinner with known white supremacists and Holocaust deniers. If that doesn't disqualify him in your mind, and that you'd publicly say this is disqualifying going forward, is there anything he could do or say that you get to that point?
Well, of course there is, Leland. Let me say, anti-Semitism is a very real issue in the world today. And there's a rising tide of anti-Semitism in many countries around the world. When I was in Congress, I co-founded the Anti-Semitism Caucus, as I write about in the book, with the only Holocaust survivor ever to serve in Congress, a Democrat, the late Tom Lantos. And, as I said at another forum in Chicago earlier today, President Trump was wrong to give a white nationalist, an anti-Semite, and a Holocaust denier a seat at the table. And I think he should apologize for it, and he should denounce those individuals and their hateful rhetoric without qualification. With that being said, as I point out in the book as well, I don't believe Donald Trump is an anti-Semite. I don't believe he's a racist or a bigot. I would not have been his vice president if he was. And people often forget the president's daughter converted to Judaism. Yep. His son-in-law is a devout Jew. His grandchildren are Jewish. And so the broad brush of attack that media leveled at him, but I think the president demonstrated profoundly poor judgment in giving those individuals a seat at the table. And as I said, I think he should apologize for it. He should denounce them without qualification. But I think
apologize would be a first. That, I think, in the 4 years you were vice president, you would.
Well, look, but anti-Semitism is a very real issue. We saw anti-Semitic violence during the Trump-Pence years. We saw the Tree of Life synagogue come under fire, and other synagogues around the country. We have to make it very clear. We believe in religious liberty, and every American of every political background should speak without hesitation to denounce the message and the language of anti-Semitism, white nationalism, and we'll always do that.
Fair enough. A little bit of a lightning round to end things up. Is D.C. really a swamp?
I think Washington, D.C. needs reform. It was about 100 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt arrived in Washington, D.C., and one of his signature accomplishments was civil service reform. I do believe that giving incoming administrations greater flexibility in bringing new men and women to Washington, D.C. on a more regular basis would be good for the nation and good for the nation's capital.
Twitter, good or bad?
I think both. I think it's both. I remember early on having a sense that Twitter was an information forum, and then oftentimes it became a rhetorical combat forum. But it has become a part of our national conversation. And for my part, I'll always hope that its new owner will keep the public square open to all viewpoints, especially conservative viewpoints that have been suppressed by many platforms in recent years. But I'll also hope that they're able to create a level, a standard of discourse on Twitter that doesn't coarsen our culture.
As you start to look at your future in public service, and you think about 2024, would the person you would select to be your running mate more along the lines of Glenn Youngkin or Ron DeSantis?
Well, look, we're gonna take some time this Christmas as a family to get together and reflect and give prayerful consideration to our future. And you know, it's been 3 years since our family's been together, Leland. I got 2 in the active duty military today, one son-in-law. So it's been 3 years since we've all been together. So we're going to take some time. Karen and I will hear the kids out, and we'll make a decision. We'll respond to what our calling is. And if we jump into that fray, I promise I'll keep you posted on our decision and any other choices that we make.
But there's different models going forward for the Republican Party. And you talked about how people did really enjoy the results of the Trump-Pence administration, but not necessarily the way we got there, right? Call it MAGA without the crazy. Is that the model that America needs in 2024?
Again, I want to go back to what I said before without being repetitive, Leland. I don't think anybody could have defeated Hillary Clinton other than Donald Trump in 2016. And when I accepted a seat on the ticket, and then served as his vice president, my determination was to help him be successful in the presidency that he was elected to advance, which was both the content of the conservative agenda and his own personal style. I just have every confidence that in the days ahead, the American people are going to sort out the kind of leadership that we need for a new season in America. I think, as I've traveled across this country the last 2 years, campaigning for candidates and doing some private travel, visiting our new granddaughter in Arizona, what I've heard again and again from people is they want to get back to the policies of the Trump-Pence years, but they want leadership that at least has the chance of uniting our country around our highest ideals, beginning with civility. I mean, you know, the American people actually every day, whether it's here in Chicago or around the country, our politics are very divided, but the American people actually find a way to get along pretty well most days. And I think they're looking for leadership that reflects that same sentiment, be passionate about what you stand for, but respect the other side in a way that moves us back to a politics where we might be able to find common ground to move the country forward.
I've covered you for a long time, and I can say, truthfully and in fairness, you've lived that every day. So it was good to see you, sir.
Thank you
very much.
Great to be with you.
Appreciate it.